Hello, friends. This is Keith Joseph from the Institute for Hermetic Studies. Today, we're going to talk about a monograph from Mark Stavish called The Power of Prayer and Belief in Spiritual Practice. And specifically, that's a teachable course and a monograph. I'll put a link to those things in the description. Specifically, I'd like to talk about one aspect of the course and monograph. I think Mark does a really interesting job innovating here our understanding of pathworking. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit, think about that, and hopefully give you some good ideas for your practice. So normally when we think about pathworking, obviously people have different ideas what they mean by it, but usually within the Hermetic tradition, we're talking about working the paths on the tree of life. If you can imagine the tree, the glyph of the tree, there's the 10 sephira and the 22 paths. And so working from, working along the paths gives you, you gain wisdom and insight. And if you kind of work through all those paths, you're rising in consciousness. So for example, this 32nd path goes from Malkuth to Yesod. It's at the bottom of the path, right? Malkuth is the kingdom, and Yesod is the foundation. And then the 32nd path has certain symbols associated with it. It's associated with Saturn and the Hebrew letter Tau and the World Tarot card. And the element Earth, right? So these are the symbols that you're thinking about when you're working on that path. There's also kinds of guided meditations that kind of take you along the path and from Malkuth to Yesod. And if you work your way through that path, it's kind of similar to assuming the God form, right? You're building up your consciousness to identify with the divine in all of its emanations. What Mark proposes in this monograph, though, is a little different. He's connecting pathworking, I think, to assuming the God form, or to that practice of assumption of the God form. And the assumption of the God form is a devotional practice on the one hand. We're worshiping the deity. We're coming into a relationship of worship with the deity, but we're also moving towards identification with the deity, right? Assuming that God form. And the practice itself, I think Mark has really innovated a lot on, and the practice of assuming the God form. And I'll leave some of that discussion to another video because something that's very interesting. I think it's very interesting. But in general, the Institute has proposed that the assumption of the God form, inner fire, and lucid dreaming are these crucial practices for our time and place. And so pathworking, I think, is connected to the assumption of the God form, right? And we propose these as the crucial practices because these are the practices that are going to most effectively and efficiently allow us to construct the body of light. The body of light is our vehicle for the continuity of consciousness, for maintaining awareness even after the demise of the physical body. That's the great work. So pathworking would be a little different in this context than using the tree of life. Instead, we might use biography. So we could choose the biographies of exemplary individuals who we would like to emulate, potentially whose qualities, whose character whose achievements we would like to bring into our personality, into our character. The real one of the secrets I think of magic, or the key to it, is that it's about the transformation of the self. It's about the transformation of the individual, the soul, however you want to think about your consciousness. That's more important than the manipulation of the material world. um, Julius Evola has a really, I think, insightful critique of modern science, where he says everybody gets a cell phone. He doesn't use a cell phone example. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but everyone gets a cell phone regardless of what they've accomplished um, themselves. So, and that's how you get addiction to cell phone, right? You're not really prepared to handle it. Or another example would be winning the lottery without actually gaining the wisdom, the financial wisdom that would allow you to acquire that wealth through your own efforts. So what we want to do is develop ourselves, and then everything else becomes possible. It becomes easy. We can accomplish so many different things because we've developed ourselves and our capacity. So, for example, um, I'm interested in becoming a musician. I might read the biographies of musicians that I admire. I have read a few musician. I don't know. I can't say the word musicians' biographies, and the first thing that I realized was how much they practiced, how dedicated they are to their instrument. I remember reading a biography of Jimi Hendrix, and he slept with the guitar. Um, I remember when I became interested in playing chess, I read a biography of Bobby Fischer, and I learned the same thing. He played so much chess. Um, he, for his mom would drop him off after school, and he would be there at the chess club till like 11 o'clock at night every day, as a kid. Um, uh, Even as an adult, he's at a party with one of his rivals, Boris Splatsky from the Soviet Union, and they're in the corner with his little magnetic chess set, messing around, figuring out moves and stuff. So my point there is that at least you start to have the realization, the discipline that's necessary to achieve that level of skill. You may decide you don't want to do that, but at least you know what's necessary. Um, if you're interested in bodybuilding, you might read a biography of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman, or something like that. Um, and what's interesting about it, I think, well, two things. One, the assumption of the God form can be a dangerous practice, almost like being involved in an egregore that you don't really understand. When we consume entertainment, literature, movies, we are engaged in that path working. We may not realize the impact that it's having on our consciousness, on our personality. And so it's worth guarding the gates of your mind. It's worth being very careful about what you take in. When I was younger, I remember reading biographies of Jim Morrison and um, Led Zeppelin, and the level of hedonism and debauchery was just, it definitely influenced my mind. Um, on the other hand, I read so many of these biographies of singers and rock bands, Bob Marley and Jim Morrison, that I was able to become a singer in a band despite a lack of talent. Um, and I think that's because of um, my commitment to those books. But I'll add, it wasn't just reading the books. I started to change my thinking, how I acted, what I was doing. And so that's what reading these biographies can do. They're giving you examples of behavior, of practices, of habits, of mindsets that if you're thoughtful and self-aware, you can incorporate skillfully into your own personality and character. If you're interested in business, you can read the biographies of successful businessmen, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that's helpful. It's a great little monograph. And it covers more than just this idea of path working, but that that idea of path working, the way that Mark presents it, I think is really innovative and is worth considering. If you've had similar experiences with biographies, of course, I should before I end, I should mention saints, magicians, of course, are um, also great biographies to read for our endeavors. But if you've read similar things, biographies, if you've done some sort of path working that you've found useful, if you have a question or a disagreement, please leave a comment. I'd love to engage with you, and I will see you in the next video.